What's going on, everybody out there? Welcome back to the Rue Morgue 200 Challenge. I am one half of your host, the toxic offender, Moodz. And of course, we have the man himself, the Mexicant, Double Shot J, also known as Mr. JP. What's going on, buddy?
Yo, back again for another Rue Morgue. I always forget this. Alternative list.
Alternative, yes. You know what? I haven't even shown this since I think since episode 1. So for the people out there that are curious on where we got the films for this, because I have had a couple questions. This Rue Morgue magazine right here.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. It's the 200 films that are in there, put into the randomizer.
Now you can still get that magazine, but it is a little out of print now, so the price is a little higher. It's like $20. I did plan on getting it eventually, but I just haven't found. I want to make sure that I want pictures to see that it's like a good copy if it's used or something.
Yeah, it's actually not too bad if you're paying $20 in the out of print market. This thing originally was $10 for Canada and US.
So I guess it's only like $10 more.
Yeah, I mean, so it's actually not too bad. Yeah, because this thing also came out in 2012, right? So it's 10 years old. So and they're always limited runs on the special ones. So.
Yeah, so that's not bad at all, actually. Pretty good price for that, because I think that like Fangoria one, the underrated or hidden gems, whatever the Fangoria one was, 100 films you need to see before you die. I think that one's even like pretty expensive now, but I think that one was even older than that one, I believe.
Right.
But there's a few different, like I've seen other, like, because like obviously we have probably like over a year, maybe even longer, of this challenge, but I was like thinking of like other challenges, and there's actually a few things out there that we could do if we ever continued this after the 200.
You know what?
Which is pretty cool.
I would be super down to do that too, man, because I think this is really fun. I just like the whole process of, having a list and then just randomizing it, like having no specific order.
It's so fun because like you're just like, what are we gonna get? It's like how we get excited for the next top 10 year that we draw, but it's in bite-sized form, right? Because it's like just one film, and I can see that why you like that, because you did your horrific weeks of 88 and 81, was it?
Right.
And it was like the same thing, just randomized and fun, Yeah, I love doing this, honestly. Like, and this week's film in particular was one that I hadn't seen, so only the second film that I hadn't seen, and honestly, I hadn't really even heard. For some reason, it just was like completely off my radar, probably because of the title's a bit weird, but very interesting movie that I'm interested to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, let's get into the film of topic tonight, from 1974, courtesy of Hammer Studios. This movie was actually distributed by Paramount, which is kind of confusing a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit, but from 1974, Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, directed by Brian Clemens, and this is actually the only movie that he actually officially directed, but he did pen quite a few films. He actually did pen And Soon the Darkness from 1970, which we also just watched for the 1970 show, which is cool. In 1971,
it's a good movie. Yeah,
it is. 1971, he penned a film called See No Evil with Mia Farrow, which is kind of weird. I mentioned this one. I haven't watched it yet, but I actually just got the Blu-ray in like 2 days ago. Oddly enough, like it's totally by chance. It was on the Powerhouse sale, so I picked it up because I wanted it. And then also in 71, he did Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which is another really cool Hammer film. He did the second, he penned the second one of the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. I love those movies, are great. And then 1980, which we have to bring out, he penned The Watcher in the Woods.
Oh wow! So he was more of a writer than a director.
Yeah. So he
see that's always very curious to me, right? Because this guy primarily wrote films, and then he tried his hand at directing. Yeah. And like, spoiler alert, like this is good movie. So I mean, like, wonder why he didn't do any more. Was it not financially successful? Was it just a bad experience? You always wonder when you see those directors who do just like one film and it's a good movie and then they don't do anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I got a theory on why Brian Clemens didn't really put more effort into directing, because so this movie came out from Hammer Studios in 1974. Now, if you know the history of Hammer, they were really kind of struggling come like the early 70s, and they tried to, they started pumping out some more of the Dracula films to like, raise their box office financially, they weren't really hitting that much. And, by 1974, it was kind of the end of Hammer, really. Financially, they just were not doing well. And I'm thinking that, he was kind of in the realm of Hammer and stuff like that. I'm thinking it maybe just had something to do with it. But 1974 penned, it had, Captain Kronos came out, Frankenstein, the Monster of Hell, Shatter came out there, and also the amazing Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, which is a mashup between Hammer and Shaw Brothers. So it's like
really?
It's
Cool.
vampire kung fu, man. It's awesome. And then of course 1976, they didn't even make one in 75. To the Devil a Daughter was the last horror film that Hammer ever did. And in 79 they released like a comedy, and that was it till 2008 when they resurrected Hammer. So this was on the decline of Hammer. So I'm thinking it probably had something to do with it. It was just kind of it probably has something to do with that. This was a fun rewatch. I hadn't watched this movie in years and really couldn't remember a lot of specifics about it. But we'll get into a quick little synopsis here. It says a master swordsman and former soldier and his hunchbacked assistant hunt vampires. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's the short and long of it. But this is a really interesting movie because I couldn't remember much about it. I really, really couldn't remember much about it. But I'm like halfway into this movie and I'm laughing to myself going, this is one of the most unique vampire movies, especially for the time too. Because Hammer was really trying to try new things, like with different mythologies and vampires. Because like a lot of their vampire films had the same kind of mythology and stuff. So they went out of the box and did this mythology, right, which is really cool. And then of course they did the Shaw Brothers stuff too a little bit in the same year. So they were thinking outside the box of this. But upon watching this, I started laughing. I was like, so I dubbed it as a swashbuckler spaghetti western supernatural horror film. Like it literally is. So I'm watching this movie going, our main character in this film is the man with no name. He's Clint Eastwood. He's literally the same character. Like
you look at the scene in the saloon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the and I'm just like, this is a fucking western. You know what I mean?
It's literally a western, man. He's a nomadic character, just like the man with no name. He strolls into town, and then there's some evil, so then he fights it, and then he leaves. But he's a master of his craft. In this case, instead of toting guns like Clint Eastwood is in the Man with No Trilogy name, the Man with No Name trilogy, he is toting a sword. It's a fucking sword. Right. It's the weirdest thing, man. So that's kind of an interesting premise. It plays out like a western. There's a bar scene. Everything is just so western. And it's supernatural, and it's got the cool thing about this movie is that it's got a really different mythology to the vampires.
Right.
It's not.
That's what I was instantly into, because I was like, oh, this is cool. Because I mean, we've seen the standard vampire tale a million times, so I always like when there's something different, which is why I like Let the Right One In. Which is that even that might even be on this list. I'm not sure. But that film added like a lot of the mythology, and that's why it was so cool. This one, I love how they start off by saying that like there's many different breeds of vampires. Species, yeah, like as many breeds of beasts on Earth that there are. There's the versions of vampires,
right?
And like this particular one that they're dealing with is very unique because it's not a blood drinker per se. It's like a life force stealer.
It sucks the youth out of you. So basically what happens is, in the typical mythology of vampires, obviously you suck the blood out, you die, right? In this one, they suck the youth out, and then when the vampire's done, you're old. You're like old. Right. You're ancient looking.
Yeah, that's cool, right? And it looks cool too. Like the first one you see of the girl with the mirror and stuff, and you see her face, you're like, holy shit, that's kind of scary.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was like, wow, like that's actually really unique. And then like the whole thing with the frog, like if they're putting dead frogs under the ground everywhere.
Super creative, because it's kind of funny because they use that as like kind of like an alarm mechanism, kind of like what they do later in the film with the more typical one with the bells and the string and stuff like that.
Right.
But this is more of an alarm too, because what they do is, this is really cool. This is where the penning of the film is very creative. It's very, very creative. I've never heard of anything like this before, but instead of like, doing your typical kind of bell snare around, what they do is they bury dead frogs in these boxes. And they kind of create like an area with these things. And what happens is, if a vampire passes through and you later dig up a frog that's alive, it means that a vampire, it was actually there, because what it does, it actually kind of gives a present of life back to the frog. So that's how they can tell that a vampire has been there. And if they dig them up dead, there was no signs of vampires. So it's a given. Like that, I don't know. It's just like proof. I really like that idea.
Right.
They're like, there wasn't a vampire.
Like thinking about it even further, and I was like, why? But then I was like, oh, maybe it wouldn't work with like all vampires. But since they're dealing with like this life essence vampire, that maybe it's like leaking like essence of life because of the
youthness.
That's what it's doing. Right. Yeah. So it's like bringing it to sort of life in that way. And I just was like, man, this is really cool. Especially when you look at the time period that this came out. Hammer had been doing their vampire thing for quite a while with the Christopher Lee stuff. And, maybe you might say that it got a little stale. And it was just kind of like cool.
Especially by the early 70s.
Sort of, right. Sort of this new mythology added to it. And I was like, wow, I really, really like where this film is going. Right off the bat, I was like, this is cool. Definitely when you look at this list, like this alternative horror, I don't like you're more familiar with this film. Obviously you've seen it before. I don't remember anybody ever talking about this one. Especially when you hear about Hammer horror, this one doesn't get brought up as much as a lot of the other titles.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that like, this is the type of film that is perfect for this list.
It seems to be most of the 70s Hammer films don't really get mentioned as much until they started getting loved by Synopsis and stuff. They started releasing, like all the kind of early cult classic ones, and then they started to get more love and stuff like that. Like when they released The Vampire Lovers and stuff, that was pretty big. But like, Vampire Circus, Countess Dracula, Lust for a Vampire, those type of movies like Twins of Evil, Hands of the Ripper. Movies like that, that's where they just weren't getting mentioned. Those ones started to get some love, and then people are like, oh shit, man, these movies are actually pretty good. I think that era before they started kind of going kind of bankrupt a little bit, they made a lot of good movies in that period that didn't get enough love, and this is definitely one of them. Another thing that's really cool about the mythologies of these vampires, they talk about breeds and species of them. Not only are they different breeds and species, but they can't be killed the same. Some can be hung. Some can be hung. Some can be staked through the heart. Some can be burned, but you have to figure out which vampire you're dealing with. And it's kind of funny how it happens in this film on how to kill him. It's kind of by accident. It's literally an accident with one of the characters. He gets bit by a vampire, and he's like, Kronos, you got to kill me. So they try to kill him, and they stab him through the heart with a stake, and he doesn't die. And they're like, fuck. And it's actually quite comical. I don't know if this is meant to be comedic, but it's funny because you're like, oh shit, that didn't work. Okay, so let's try hanging him. So they fucking try to hang him. And in the middle of doing that, they accidentally push his iron cross that's on his neck, which obviously was not affecting him because he's wearing a cross. And that's another part of mythology I thought was really cool, because vampires could never, if you got a cross, it would be fucking killing you, right? But it actually had to,
or at least like burning you or something.
But in the scene, he kind of touches him by accident or whatever, and he puts this thing into him, and he figures it out, and he's like, oh shit, it
had to impale him.
With the iron cross, and I thought that was really neat. It was just it's kind of a cool thing that they did, and it's very creative. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And I actually think the visuals in this are really cool. And another thing that I really liked about this is some of the vampire attacks, it's almost like a wit, like, well, in the story there's a they're saying it's actually, they're kind of confused about it because typically a youth sucking vampire will be young. But everybody's saying that they're seeing an old person.
Yeah, there was
that's interesting.
There was witnesses that were saying, "Oh no, like I saw an old person attack," and so like, "Oh, well, that doesn't really make any sense because you're right. Like if you were sucking youth out of somebody, you think you would be young, but then when you're thinking about it, which I couldn't remember, and I was like, but in reality, if you were needing to go suck the youth out of someone, you'd probably reverted back to being old at that time because I think it's like a continuum thing, right? You need to keep the essence up. It's like certain mythologies to certain things, like you need to kill to keep the power up kind of thing. But in this case, you need to keep sucking youth because if you don't have the youth sucked out of someone for a certain period of time, I think you kind of revert back to being old. Hence why they were seeing someone that was old.
Which would make sense, yeah.
Right.
Well, kinda. But there's also like, I don't know if you caught it, but they like at the end of the movie when they sneak into the house, there's actually a reveal there of why they were seeing an older person. I don't know about spoilers or whatever, but I could tell you off show or whatever. But one thing that it's almost like a
well, you get introduced to the character earlier in the film. Like there's a scene where Kronos goes to the house and he's talking with the brother and sister in the film, and there is somebody that's all fucking old and shitty in a bed, right? And which happens to be related. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, going, well, that seems like it could be the territory that we're looking for here.
They don't really shy away from it in like a reveal sense. Like you kind of like right away you like know what the deal is.
Well, I'm thinking
especially like the dialogue that they have.
Right, because like the way the narrative is leaning towards, you're like, okay, well, I don't think it's so much the brother and sister kind of thing, but then when they show the old person in the bed, you're like, well, we're dealing with old people and youth, and I'm like, that just seems like a match made in heaven right there. It's just kind of right. It's just, I don't know. It seemed like, I don't know if they were trying to hide that type of reveal, but like when the reveal happens, you're like, oh, but totally, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
but the way like the first attack and I think like even another one is, it's really cool how they do it, because typically in like a vampire film, it's like late at night and like a vampire like stalks a young woman or something and then kills them and they find the body the next day. This is happening in plain sight in front of people, but it's happening so fast that they don't even know what's going on. And like, I love that scene. I think it's it might be like this. Well, it's probably like the third or so one, but it's that the guy sends off the girl into the forest and she's like down in the distance and you see her scream and then he runs over to her and she's like old. And it was just really cool because it happened like right in front of his face and in front of the audience's face. And it's just different. Like you don't really see that happen in like vampire films.
But you almost,
so I thought that was really cool.
But it was almost like it was invisible too, though. You really couldn't even really see.
The audience doesn't really see anything because it's like so off in the distance and it happens so quick. But it's cool that it's in broad daylight too. And actually we talked about vampires a couple weeks ago. This is our second vampire film. And that was like a lot of stuff in the daylight too. But I thought that it was just really neat how they were handling these like vampire attacks, and that they're in like the forest. It almost feels like a witch or something, you know. It's creepy. I like that. And I love what they're doing with like the shots of like the either dead people or like people that have had the essence sucked out of them. It looks very creepy. It's just, I just thought this movie was like really well done throughout like all of like the mythology and the shots and stuff like that.
You know, hence the alternative type of films, right? It's the alternative mythologies too. Like, you know, with vampires, the reveal explains what all the confusion is through the film. Like, all these vampires, they can roam in the daytime and stuff, and then you find out why. And in this one, we already know that the mythology is different. So even when the reveal happens, you're just like, but all these vampires have different ways of dying, and obviously these ones, but it's different because they're almost like invisible too. Like there's a really cool scene in this film where they're out in the forest, and one of the guys that they're with, which we actually just talked about, but he basically gets bit in broad daylight and he doesn't even know that he actually turns into a bat and attacks somebody until after the fact. He figures it out after the fact. So like things are happening, like the mythology, the way they created these type of vampires is so unique because even the person that turned and did what they didn't even really know until they really had to be told. So, and that was in the daytime. So this shit was happening in the day. So obviously these type of vampires cannot be killed by the UV rays and stuff. And it's really interesting. It's very, very cool. There's so many cool things about this film. I just think
the very concept of the idea that there are many breeds of vampires with different powers and different ways to kill them is a cool idea. You could actually even expand upon it further.
It actually makes it a scary premise because in most vampire films, when you're battling vampires, what are you usually doing? You got like holy water and stakes, right? And shit like that. And that's usually what your defense mechanism is to beat these fucking things. But
and sunlight,
right? Well, obviously, yeah. But in this case, you have to figure it out. But by the time you figure it out, sometimes you might be too fucking late. Right? There's so many different ways to kill. I think that's the scariest thing about the vampires is that you could be fighting this going, well, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Like there's so many different methods. Hanging, fire, stakes, iron. Like there's just so many different fucking ways. And I was decapitation, sunlight apparently didn't work for these ones, but might work for others. It's crazy. It's a really cool premise. And so when I was in the middle of this film, I'm thinking to myself going, it's too bad that Hammer was falling out of financial issues because they had actually meant this to be a franchise. This was supposed to be the first film.
It feels like it could be.
Right away.
Captain Kronos. Like, he has, character presence and charisma. And like you said, the whole, like, almost like the man with no name vibe to him. Like, I could totally see this dude being a franchised character, and
he's the tough guy
dealing with different types of vampires and stuff. It would have been really cool.
He's the nomadic tough guy that solves problems, right? And like there's no end to this because he's nomadic, so he just goes to the next town and figures it out. It's he's continue along, and maybe the next film the vampires are completely different, and you can only use like garlic to kill them in certain ways, garlic. But the idea is there. Actually, one thing about Captain Kronos that really sold it for me with the whole Eastwood contrast was he's literally smoking these little cigars like Eastwood did in those films. Right? Yeah. The same. They totally just took that character and just made him, instead of having guns, he had a fucking sword, which I think is so cool. And actually, my favorite scene in the film is actually the bar scene where these cronies are kind of hired on, I guess, to kill Captain Kronos because he's getting too close. Well, he's there for a purpose, right? He's there to kill vampires, so obviously someone's going to send them out to kill him and stuff. And what do they fucking say? It's like he calls them.
He's calling the hunchback like humpback or something like that, and then the Kronos tells him his name's like Gast or whatever, or Gerst or Garst or whatever the hell his name is.
Right.
And he's like, I'll stick with humpback. And he's like, well, I won't or something. And he's like, why not? And he's like, because I don't like it.
It's funny. And then the buddy steps up there, and then they're all talking shit to fucking Kronos, and Kronos is like, he's like, well, it's not like I'm gonna call this guy Ratface, or I'm not gonna call this guy Fatty. And he's like, I'm not gonna call this guy Big Mouth. And then they kind of step in, and he literally fucking one swipes them. He kills 3 guys in one shot with the swords.
Directed very well too, because like even the way like the bodies like fall over and stuff was just really cool. Like they drug it out a little bit, and it's like I just love that scene.
It's my the showdown in the bar
film too, right? And it reminds you of just like this guy has like swag, you know what I mean? But like they didn't call it swag back then, but he has swag, you know what I mean? He's just like, you don't fuck with Captain Kronos. I like that.
I love the way he's talking. Like they're totally trying to intimidate him, and then he's literally just like fighting back with like these little kid insults. And my favorite part about the scene is actually when he kills all 3, he turns to the bartender. He's like, he doesn't say bro, but he's like, bro, you didn't answer my question. He says it so nonchalantly. It's like the most perfect line too. And
you still didn't answer my question.
It doesn't even come off comedic in like a corny way either. It's funny because it's like his character. It's just written so perfectly. It's exactly how he is. He's just calm and cool doing his thing. One element to this film I'm very glad that they didn't like fully elaborate on and go too deep into it was the relationship with Caroline Monroe. which we didn't even mention that she's even in this movie.
Yeah, Carolyn Monroe. Yeah, she's in here.
So this movie was shot in 1972, released in 1974. So she was a couple years younger, but she was probably about 23, 24 years old in this one. She always looked young. But yeah, so basically they kind of rescue her from public humiliation. I think that she had done something. She was dancing on she
danced on like a Sunday or something.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. So anyways, they put her into one of those, whatever they call those, what are those stocks? I think they're called stocks. Yeah, let me see. I think it's called so restraining device is used for corporal punishment and public humiliation. Yeah, so it's called a stock. So anyways, they rescue her from that, and then to repay them, she jumps on board and decides that she's going to fight crime with them, fight vampires with them, kind of thing. But she's beautiful, man. Oh, she has that fucking look that you just you love looking at on screen. And this is probably the closest I've ever seen her to get naked in a film, because she always refused to ever get naked, to actually show something to the audience. And it's very close. But so anyways, they start up a relationship, kind of, they do their thing a little bit, but it really doesn't play itself out. And then at the end of the film, he just kind of goes off, and which is really cool because, they didn't try to, throw this subplot into the film and kind of take away from the really, really great mythology that they established in this film, and the great, the effects, and, just the great pacing of this movie. There's great characters, there's fun characters, and that's one thing that plagues a lot of vampire films, let's face it, especially from the early 70s, is pacing in vampire films. For some reason, they just have so much filler in them. This one doesn't. It's got great characters, and it's got these likable characters, and there's always something happening. It's always moving forward. But man, what a shame. This is probably one of the biggest crimes that we didn't get 2 or 3 more of these movies. And it's kind of, it sucks too, because obviously Hammer has the rights to these things, so no one could ever make an official sequel to Captain Kronos. But it would have been cool in this time period, because it just adds that element.
It's a different era, man. You don't you don't see stuff like this made anymore. But speaking of that Blu-ray from Scream Factory, I told you last week that it was $30. I actually ended up finding a copy for $17.
Nice. I
did buy it, but it hasn't got here yet, so I had to rent it on Amazon for $3. But I did. I'm glad I actually blind bought it. But now that I watched it, I'm actually glad to have it in the collection. Especially, I like collecting the Hammer anyway, but I particularly really enjoyed this movie, so happy to have it in the collection.
Yeah, no, it was awesome to rewatch this, man. Like I said, it had been so many years since I'd seen it, and I was like, oh shit, this is so. It's such a better watch for me, because watching it back in the day, I probably didn't even think oh, this mythology is so unique. But that's what really makes this movie separate. It separates itself from a lot of vampire films, is because of that awesome idea with the mythology and stuff. And honestly, even for a Hammer film, we know a lot of Hammer films don't really have a lot of blood and gore and things like that. I know in the 70s they tried to amp it up with the exploitation a little bit more with the boobs, and they got vampire lovers. There's a lot of tits and ass and a little bit more exploitive angles, and they tried to up the blood and stuff. This one doesn't have any nudity, but it does have a little bit of blood and stuff, and which is kind of cool to see. It's not over the top or nothing, but it's there. It's prevalent. So there's a little bit of effects with blood and stuff. So I know Carolyn Monroe actually said this is one of her. She holds this film the closest to her heart, and all the films that she ever did.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
So it's basically the one film that she really likes most. And I was kind of thinking to myself, it's not Slaughter High.
Slaughter High, yeah.
Slaughter High always.
Maniac.
Oh man, she's in lots of films.
Last horror movie. She's in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, she's actually in that Sinbad movie too, I think I mentioned. But yeah, she man, Slaughter High always makes me laugh, because that came out in 1986. She was 36 or 37 in that movie, playing a fucking teenager. Or playing someone that's 10, 15 years younger than her, kind of thing. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's so funny, but she honestly did look very, very young. But one of cinema's greatest failures that they never got Carolyn Monroe to show her boobies. It's crazy when you actually think about it, right? I guess she was asked hundreds of times. I read one time that it's every movie she turned down tons of movies because they're well, no, you got to show your boobs in this film. She's like, no, I'm not doing it. It's kind of crazy.
Dang. Sticking to her guns.
I'd like to see a list of movies that she turned down because she had to show her boobs in them. Right, yeah. Kind of crazy. But but yeah, very, very interesting film. Oh yeah, actually, one thing I wanted to mention too, the Horst Janssen, the guy that plays Captain Kronos, he's a German fella. He is actually dubbed in this film because he's got a really thick German accent, which is kind of interesting, right?
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't even realize.
They did a really good job. And I wasn't sure at first, and I'm like, is it dubbed? And sure shit, I found in the trivia that he's actually was dubbed. I was like, oh fuck, there you go. So it's kind of interesting, but I do highly, highly recommend Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. If you can find it for less than $30, apparently, is what it's going for these days.
Yeah, currently it is on deep discount for, it was like $17 or $17.50. I actually picked up a couple Scream Factories that were, decently priced. I grabbed the Mangler Tobe Hooper film, as well as like the Wasp Woman and like a couple of other of the older flicks that they had on there that I didn't own. But yeah, I did like an order. So yeah, deep discount, very, very good prices a lot of times with a lot of like older Scream Factory releases.
Right.
Actually, that was one of the companies that they came out and said that Scream Factory basically told them they can't sell their titles too cheap because they had a bunch on there for like $6 before. And yeah,
wow.
Scream Factory. Yeah, that's the type of stuff Scream Factory be pulling.
Right. One thing I do like about this movie that I forgot to mention, but was the scene where after they kill their friend, because after he got bit and stuff, I think it was Dr. Marcus, right? Was it Dr. Marcus or was it Gross? No, it was Dr. Marcus. Anyways, the town folk, they actually see the end of it. They see them killing him.
Right.
And they basically kind of form a mob to get rid of him and stuff like that. But like, in like a lot of Westerns, a lot of films like this and shit, it's more hearsay. Like, oh, someone did this, let's go form a mob. And like, they just kind of go off like instinct, like, oh, we gotta go get him. But they actually saw the end result. And I thought that was kind of clever to put that in there too, because it's not playing off this, the cliche stereotype, whatever you want to call it in Westerns, where it's just like kind of hearsay. We're going to go form them. Because it seems like a lot of times in Westerns, they just want to go and mob up and kill people, lynch them and do shit. But in this case, they actually saw the end result, which they didn't see what happened, but they saw them kill him.
Vampire.
Yeah. So I thought that was actually kind of cool. And that's pretty interesting. Yeah. But yeah, one of the better kind of unknown vampire films out there. And it's just such a shame, man. I could definitely watch 2-3 more of these, man. It's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, I guess might as well get into ratings on this. There's not really much more to say without giving the whole damn thing away.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, man, this was a hit for me. I dug what they did with it. The frog thing made me smile because I was like, man, that is so cool. Like I dug that. So, and then even later in the film, he throws a frog like under a carriage too, like a dead one, you know what I mean, to sort of catch him. Yep. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and give it an 8 out of 10 for a first time watch. I think it's very solid.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's very enjoyable. And honestly, man, it's a perfect length. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's 90 minutes. And like, these films when they just end, like it's not like today's films where the running time's 97 minutes. The movie probably ended at 91 or 92. No, if it's 91, it ended at 90 minutes and 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah. It's just like roll the credits. Yeah. Pretty much everything from like the Universal monsters all the way up into like the mid 70s shit just ended. Yeah. Like, boom.
I always thought that was very interesting too, that they never showed the credits and now they show, because I think something happened with that where they actually have to show all the credits that are involved with making the films and stuff. You actually have to do it, I think. But I guess back in those days, they didn't really care. Like, if this guy did sound and this guy's was like the third grip, fuck that guy. He's not getting any credit. Yeah. It's like, but yeah, Captain Kronos, 1974 Hammer film. Definitely recommend this. It's fun. I'm glad that you liked it. I was watching this again and I was like, man, I think JP is really going to dig this, especially because I know you like mythology and different shit. It's an alternative vampire movie, right? So, yeah. Well,
honestly, Hammer's been pretty good to me in general. Like, I've pretty much always enjoyed Hammer flicks, all the ones that I've seen, from like the Frankensteins, the Draculas. to the, like you said, the Vampire Lovers, Twins of Evil, pretty much like most Hammer flicks I enjoy. Like some of the later ones in the franchises, like I'm not a huge fan of Dracula 1972 or whatever that one is.
You know what's funny about that film?
Well,
like the last like 2 or 3 Dracula films with Christopher Lee, like his on screen, like he's on screen for like in Dracula 72. I think he's like on screen for like 3 or 4 minutes total. Like it's ridiculous, like how low it is. But I mean, people don't realize that. It's like we've had this conversation before when we did Hellraiser. Like people don't realize that Pinhead, Doug Bradley, is only on screen for what, 7 minutes in the first one?
Yeah, it's very short.
It's very short, but most people only remember Pinhead from those. It's also embedded in. It's kind of like branded in your mind too because it's on the poster. But people seem to fail to realize like how little some of these villains are actually in these movies. But I think a total in the last like 3 Dracula films, like Christopher Lee has like 12 minutes of screen time. It's just crazy, man.
He was just getting in and getting out at that point.
Oh yeah, big time. Could have filmed all 3 of those in one weekend. Really.
Right.
But okay, so this part of the episode, I guess I actually had it ready to go here, so I don't have to fumble around with it. But I got all the rest of the films in the randomizer. I'm going to hit random on here, and we have the Manson Family. Ooh, that's going to be a good discussion.
The Manson Family.
That's
interesting.
Jim Van Beber film,
who we just talked about like last week or the week before.
Yeah, dude. Oh man, you've never seen this one before?
No. Does it have a release?
Yeah, it does. It was released by Dark Sky on DVD. I'm not sure if it might have a Blu-ray actually.
What year is that?
97. Probably one of the best movies from 97, to be honest. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's actually on Tubi, which is good.
Yeah. I think there might be different. All right, so just
Severin put out a blue.
Just make sure you're watching the unrated version because I know it's okay. Here we go. Yeah, so the unrated version is like 11 minutes longer than the R-rated, so 95 minutes, and then the R-rated is 84. That's quite a bit. But yeah, you definitely don't want to miss that footage.
Okay. All right, I will try to find that version if I can.
I know
interesting.
There is a Blu-ray. I just can't remember who. I thought maybe
is it Severin?
No, Dark Sky put out the DVD. Oh yeah, no. Oh, you're right, man. Severin did put out it's long out of print, I think. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Dark Sky put out the DVD.
Yeah, that looks like an early ass.
It is.
Severin
It
release.
is. It's actually like right at the beginning of Severin's Blu-rays and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it's been out of print forever. Yeah, you can still get the DVD. It's actually still Prime. Crazy. So Dark Sky still has it in print, apparently. Yeah, the Blu-rays, that's one Severin Blu-ray. I'm missing a few of the older ones. Not many, but that's one of them I'm actually missing. I think I passed on it just because I had the DVD and it was probably expensive back in the day. I was just like, a little bit more conservative. But it is what it is. All right, so the Manson. Ooh, that's going to be a good one, man. Oh, I haven't watched it forever. Crazy. You know what's funny? Actually, somebody actually asked me not too long ago to review the Manson Family. This is kind of strange. I mean, it was probably like a year ago, but I'm glad I didn't because now I get to do it again. I'm watching a bit.
Interesting. That's an interesting title. All right, I'm down. I've never seen this one. So
it's crazy, dude. It's fucking nuts. So it says 10th anniversary edition. So this Blu-ray would have came out in 2007.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
That's like the beginning of Severin.
Wow,
that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, okay. It says 2013. I don't know what the fuck's going on here. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah. No, it couldn't have been 2007. 10th anniversary edition. 90. That doesn't even make any fucking sense now, does it?
Who knows, man?
Who knows? Anyways, carrying on. All right, so that's going to do it here for episode 6, and we'll see you guys in episode 7 with the Manson Family. Fuck yeah. That's going to be crazy.
See you then.
It's crazy. All right, guys.
Peace.
Deuces.